Welcome back, Doubly Divine Radio listeners, to another podcast with your hosts, Justice Bartlett
and Jennifer Yost. We've got a very fascinating topic as far as I'm concerned tonight. Ancient technology.
I think so. I think it's very fascinating. And I know, Jen, you've got your personal, professional connection with the Egyptian energy going on. So this probably strikes a chord for you as well.
Yeah, I find it all very, very a key to our unlocking our consciousness to elevated levels amongst our humanity.
And I would say the last journey that you did was quite lovely.
Yeah, I think we got some ancient technology downloaded to us from the powers that be.
So essentially, and this is a great thing to keep in mind, is that these experiences that we've had throughout history leave imprints on our consciousness, and that technology, be it spiritual technology or be it physical technology, always leaves a footprint behind. There's always some sort of trace that we can follow to get back to where we were at a spiritual place in different times, or even to get back to various technologies that have been on the planet at different times. And we've got a really exciting guest that we're going to talk with about ancient technology.
Yes, Mr. Claude Swanson is joining us on tonight's podcast.
For the second time.
Yeah, we had him on probably about a year ago. What did we call that?
I think we talked about the science of consciousness with Claude last time.
Yeah.
And I would definitely recommend checking out that previous podcast with Claude, The Science of Technology.
Yes, a good one indeed.
But before we jump into tonight's topic and conversation, we want to thank our sponsors, IntegrateHealing.com
and Embodime.org
and Serene Sound Studios for all your production and musical needs.
Yes. That's how we keep this show afloat. And listeners, also, if you ever want to send us a show topic that you want to hear us talk over, or you would like a mini reading or something over a podcast, just email us at info@doublydivineradio.com.
We're really excited to interact with our fans on Facebook at Doubly Divine Radio, and you'll be able to follow us on YouTube here soon as well.
So stay tuned for more.
And without further ado,
let's bring on Mr. Claude Swanson. Applause. Hey, Claude. Thanks for.
It's great to be here. Hi, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, so since you're a physicist and a scientist, and we also caught you on that series, The Pyramid Code, that's streaming on Netflix. I believe you're on the second episode of that series, Pyramid Code, talking about ancient technology. I just thought you'd be, a great expert to speak to us about just what you know about the topic and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I was on the internet today looking at some of the pyramid discoveries in recent years in Peru. They're finding fields and hundreds of huge pyramids that were built there that again just continue the same phenomenon that we see in China and Russia and Eastern Europe, as well as Egypt and Mexico. So all over the world are pyramids, and they're huge. Some of the stones are immense. They're hard to understand how they actually even move them into place. And so the big question ought to be why? Why they built so many pyramids? What was the reason or the function or the purpose? And I think I can offer some an explanation perhaps for what may be behind that.
That's exactly why we wanted to bring you on.
Well, from my understanding, and you can speak to this, Claude, is that these sacred sites in pyramids and whatnot, they are located on certain ley lines on the grid of the planet, and where the ley lines intersect. So there happens to be more concentrated energy vortexes where some of these sites are. Is that true to what you know about it?
Yes, it is. I think pyramids do locate them so they can take advantage of the energy flow in the area. That's part of what they're doing. So you want to have them on ley lines, because ley lines are conduits or channels that bring in subtle energy or ley energy or chi into the pyramid. But the other important thing, I think of a pyramid as serving a purpose similar to some crop circles. They're almost like a machine that convert the energy into a particular form of energy that the priests or the people who are the community there wants to have. There's a phenomenon that you're probably familiar with called the Yuga cycle, about 24,000 years. It used to be thought of as the rate at which the axis of the Earth slowly changes in the sky as it goes through a circle, coming back to its original starting point. And physicists tried to explain that as due to precession from mechanical reasons, interaction of the Earth with the Moon and things like that. But those theories were all kind of shaky. And then in the late 1900s, 1895 or so, the guru of Yogananda discovered that actually there is a cycle of civilization that we all go through with peak golden ages and dark ages. And it's about 24,000 years. And it has to do with the motion of the solar system relative to the other stars in the galaxy here. And what he says, and this is supposedly also encoded in the old ancient Hindu Vedas, that these cycles of civilization, they're caused by this motion of the solar system. And so we had these great ages when intelligence and intuition reaches a very high level on the planet. Then we go through other times, halfway through the cycle, 12,000 years later, when we hit the Dark Age, the bottom. And we call that the Dark Age here in Western civilization as well. It's when the Roman Empire fell, and people pretty much forgot everything, and technology went back to a very primitive level. So you can look at Rome or Samaria, and they had much better plumbing then than they had during the Middle Ages in Europe. So we forgot things. So you go through these cycles up and down, and so that's one thing that's very, very important to understand. Because if you want to understand the past, what's happened here on Earth, you have to be aware that it's not the linear record of history that our history books say. That's just the part that we remember. The last, 2,000 years is what we remember. We have it written down, but there's been a lot more that's happened on the Earth in past ages. And things like Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Cremo, Richard Thompson's books, those books are very good at digging up evidence of these past advanced civilizations. But during that time, they had a much better understanding of subtle energy and consciousness and high technology than we do today. One of the theories that I propose in my book, Life Force, it's on my website or it's on Amazon, it's called Life Force, The Scientific Basis. It's all about the subtle energy, the energy we call chi, or prana, or the Russians call it torsion, and we now have a pretty good science developing for what this is. That at that time, at the peaks of the last height of the last golden age, people understood this energy very well. And they understand that that cycle is caused by the density or the intensity of that energy flowing down onto the earth. When a certain component called left-handed torsion is very high, people are more intuitive. They're more psychic. They can see things. They can get ideas very quickly. They can see through to the truth very well. When that energy is low, intelligence tends to be low, comprehension and consciousness is low, and we're only able to conceive of the material world. That's it, a very low level of intelligence, and that's what happened in the Dark Ages. So this is the cycle, I believe, and the interesting thing about pyramids is that pyramids produce the concentration of this particular energy that gives you more intuition. It's the left-handed torsion that is strong at the base of the pyramid. So if you were a priest and you wanted to preserve that special energy that gave you your intelligence, as the cycle starts to wane, as the golden age begins to fade, as the earth moves out of the special energy period when that energy was abundant, flowing down on the earth, you'd want to do something, try to preserve it in a few places. So you'd build pyramids, and you'd have chambers or ways to get in there and do your meditation and do your thinking. So that's my suspicion for one of the underlying reasons why pyramids may have been so popular, and also why, especially as golden ages start to wane, which was around 10,000 years ago or so, why there would have been a flurry of pyramid building.
I have so many thoughts spinning that I want to, connections I want to make.
Well, that's my theory.
The one that actually is kind of playing right off the top of my head is this left-handed spin, and this idea that that the right spin is usually more masculine, the right side of the the right side of the brain is usually more masculine, or vice versa. Sorry, and that the left is usually associated with the feminine, and that these golden ages where this spiritual energy and this technology has been at its peak are in these times when the left-handed spin is the most prominent. And even in the pyramid code, something that they talked about was that at that time Egypt was a matriarchal society, that it seemed like that the women were more in charge than the men were. And I just find that curious. Women are naturally a little bit more intuitive than most men. I think it has something to do with the way that we're wired. But I find that really interesting. I find that really curious. And I find that interesting that we are experiencing this sort of revisitation of a lot of the feminine stuff on the planet today, as we're kind of in the upswing heading back into one of these cycles. And
Yeah, I agree. We only have a few thousand years to wait.
Well, I believe we've just entered the Bronze Age, actually, from what I know.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Yep. So, we have a few thousand more to go to the Golden Age. be doing some more reincarnations to help out with that.
But it does, I think my suspicion, and certainly one of the effects the crop circles has. I associate crop circles with pyramids very closely because, to me, they drew our attention back to those earth energies. If you go to the crop circles, you find they're all built in areas where there are ley lines, where there are aquifers close to the surface of the earth, so the earth energies are present there, and the crop circles are manipulating those energies in the same way that stone circles and the pyramids do. So you can produce what a pyramid or a crop circle, a pyramid or a stone circle does is they help collect and redirect the energy flow in the ley lines so that you get concentrations of certain types of energy in certain places in the formation to help you to go into altered states and to access certain levels of consciousness. So they're kind of a machine that's taking advantage of this naturally available energy in the landscape. You funnel it, and you draw it in to collect it. The ancient, the Freemasons, when they built the churches, great cathedrals in Europe, and even before that, if you go to some of the old churches in England, you find they also are built on ley lines. And they also are built with a very clear understanding of where the ley lines were. They would redirect the ley line. So the bluish, the feminine energy goes down the central aisle of the church, where all the parishioners are sitting in their seats. It goes right among them down the aisle to the front, and it crosses a masculine energy line that's crossing the at the altar, where the priest is going to be standing and preaching or talking. And that's the power point, where there's a vortex that's produced in those two cloths. And that gives whoever is speaking more impact, while the line down the center makes the people in the audience more receptive. So the Masons understood these principles, and of course they probably learned from the Druids and the people who built the stone circles before that. So there was a science to all this, and it serves a purpose, and that's really the main point. Crop circles kind of pull our attention back to that, and they get you to look at it again. And when I was in the crop circles, I could feel that energy, and that helped me to discover or rediscover what they were trying to say, the importance of this ancient engineering technology that we had forgotten about.
Well, and this might be just a stretch from me, but as you were describing how in the cathedrals and the churches, the dissection of energy down the aisle and then across, that's like the symbol of the cross, right? The crucifix cross.
Well, it is. It is, absolutely.
I almost wonder if that's significant of showing us this is actually a symbol of ley lines, not necessarily Jesus dying on the cross, right?
Yeah, you could be right. They may have
don't
been saying, that that's one of the secret meanings, perhaps, of the cross. And some people, perhaps,
yeah, I don't know. That
showing
just
that they understood that technology.
Yeah. So do you think those pyramids also, because they did have the aquifer below with the water, and it's pumping out this big energy field, it could also produce electricity?
I don't know. I'm not a big advocate of that whole pyramid power plant theory. I don't know. I'm an agnostic. I haven't really studied it very much. My personal opinion is that they're missing the point.
Okay.
It's not about power generation.
Okay.
I mean, not of any conventional form of power. I think it's really much more in the psychic realm. I know that one thing that the priests did, certainly with the stone circles and perhaps with the pyramids as well, is they could use them to direct energy because it's really the person, the consciousness of the individual is an important part of the machine. When you sit in, we'll say in Egypt, for example, they have Holy of Holies, which are little stone boxes that the priests would sit in, perhaps chant or meditate, and these are coupled acoustically to larger buildings, which are then coupled in turn to even larger buildings, which are all part of the temple. And what that means is, energetically, you're kind of coupling something that's very small, like a person, to something that's very large, like the world. How do you do that? In engineering parlance, this is called an impedance mismatch. You're trying to get two things of very different frequency or different scale to link up to each other, the priest with something much larger. And the temples were designed to do that by the way they have these vibrations. Each little structure inside the temple was free to vibrate at some resonant frequency, and then they could couple to the larger structure outside. So the priest, in turn, gets his Holy of Holies vibrating, then that couples with the larger structure, etc. So I think that gives the priest an ability to affect external events. One thing we know is that they were using some of these structures for long-distance communication. This has also been looked into in England, where it's possible some of these old principles to send messages, not with TV, not with electronics, but with a very different, a subtle energy system to send messages. So I think that type of technology is probably much more what was involved than anything electronic or things that we think of today as conventional technology. Another thing, which is weather modification. I mean, today we talk about HARP and we talk about, arrays of antennas and doing radio waves. But as I understand it, the old Druids could whip up the storm by powering up that stone circle. You get the stone circle powered up. You have a bunch of people, especially chanting, dancing around it, all focusing on the stones, coupling in the consciousness of the individuals, coupled to the consciousness of the stones, and that powers up the entire circle, and it begins to affect the environment through subtle energy. So it's an ancient technology, very different from electronics. And I know that probably sounds far-fetched, but even today in Australia, they call the ley lines there the song lines.
Right.
And they go hundreds of miles across the Australian wilderness. And people, the native people there, have a tradition. They march along those song lines, singing and dancing and praying to energize those lines, to get that energy flowing again, because it helps them with their crop, helps them with the weather, the rain, fertility, etc. So I think these traditions are probably worldwide, and it's a different technology than we have today, but I think based on subtle energy or consciousness, but it's a real technology.
So what it sounds to me like what you're saying, Claude, is that the way that these ancient technologies worked was really kind of dependent on a conscious interface with humans and with the environment, and with a deeper understanding of the connection that consciousness has from human beings to the earth, from the earth to human beings, to really function and to make things happen. Whereas today, it's far more removed, right? I mean, like we talked about last time in the science of consciousness, science will barely even acknowledge the effect that consciousness has these days.
Right. Electronics doesn't respond very readily to consciousness. I mean, if you go back to the Princeton Air Lab experiments with random event generators, we can build a few very delicate devices that do respond to consciousness, but it's kind of a weak effect. And as Westerners, we're not trained to use our consciousness to affect the environment. Our school system, our education, teaches us all kinds of left brain, very cognitive things, arithmetic, math, memorization, that have nothing to do with using our consciousness. So, it's kind of it's one of those muscles we've got how to use.
Well, it's very, very, very interesting. So in your opinion, Claude, I know there's some theories out there about the pyramid being like a weapon and stuff. What do you think about that?
I don't buy it.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think someone's reading too much science fiction, or I don't know. I think it's sad that it tells where our culture has gone. There was so much preoccupied with weapons nowadays that we've forgotten that there can be other principles and other, belief systems that, first of all, if you're an agrarian people, what do you care about? The first thing, you want the crops to grow. You want to make sure there's good food for the
Right,
people.
prosperity, commerce.
Yeah, you don't want the floods to wipe out everything. It's the weather and all those things. You want to make sure those things function well. If you have a technology that you believe can help with that, you'll put a lot of focus on that. And I think that's probably one of the main things. I think I do believe, it's just sort of a suspicion. I can't prove it, but it's a suspicion that I think also you want your village to be happy. You want people to get along. You want there to be a good energy, a good atmosphere for people to live. And I think there are aspects of subtle energy that my book Life Force talks about that can be conducive to that. That can make you happier, can make the crops more productive, can help the plants to grow, can help the people to be more healthy. And so one of the natural things I think that a priest would want to use his stone circles for is to produce a bubble of protection around the village to make sure that you had a good environment, a healthy environment, a prosperous environment. So I would guess that things like that would be really important. And I do think, of course, with the pyramids, probably there was long-distance communication that may have been an important piece too. But I can't see some of the other some of the applications people are talking about. It's hard for me to believe.
Well, and I agree with your theory there with creating the harmonic balance within the society through the subtle energy, because when I host a Reiki circle or attend other healing circles, we're working with chi and subtle energy, and the room by the end of the evening is just a very lovely Reiki soup or harmonious atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly. Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that our Western society needs to relearn. I'm really glad that you're doing that. And the more people who are aware of that, when we know that's possible, then it helps us to put ourselves in the mindset of the people who built those stone circles, those old formations. Because that's how they saw the world, I think.
I'm kind of surprised that as a human race, no one has, or maybe there are, recreated some pyramids and worked it out to see, let's get one cranked up and see what it does.
Oh, there are. There
Yeah?
are people creating pyramids. There's
private,
a guy who
private residences.
made a house.
Yeah.
There's lots of people on the fringe who are playing with pyramids, but not in the big sense that what the ancients did. But
Right.
we don't even have the technology to build those. So how did they build them, Claude? What do you think about that?
The pyramids?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's two methods. I think that Joe McMoneagle did some remote viewing. Somebody else did some remote viewing too, but I think Joe did some of it. And there's one theory which is fairly mundane, which is that if you look at the surroundings of the Giza Pyramid complex, it's been kind of cut down compared to some of the land around it, and it could have been flooded at an ancient time. So you could have floated in some of those stones to lift them up to do some of the construction. And I think there's some evidence of that. So that's the mundane, less interesting theory. But don't forget that there's also evidence the Great Pyramid was repaired at the time of Cheops. I think that's probably the time when conventional archaeologists say it was built, more likely he just repaired it. And perhaps that was when the flooding was done. I don't know. So that's one method. That's a fairly prosaic, not very exciting way to do it.
Right.
But that would work. The other way is levitation. And there are plenty of some sporadic reports in various places in the world to suggest that the stones can be levitated and have been levitated. And if you have an entire community chanting or sending out the energy, it may well be possible to levitate them. I just, that's my preference. If you want to go back to, say, 10,000 years ago, what's the longest time ago that we have these structures, then I would tend to think levitation might be the answer. Some of the stones, like if you go to Baalbek in Lebanon, where the stones are 10 times as big, it's very difficult to see how they could have been built with any man-made conventional technology. So I would tend to opt for levitation there. But proving it's another matter. But I do think it's possible.
Yeah, it's Yoda style. Use the Force.
Right.
I kind of think
exactly.
Yeah, I think the people had some help from some beings from the stars, and that's probably who showed them what's up with build these structures, and you'll have a much more utopia here. That's kind of my guess.
See, to me, that's part of why the whole Yuga cycle concept is so important, because people need to understand we have had these golden ages in the past when people were much more advanced, much more knowledgeable than they are today. We're just kind of coming back slowly, remembering, rebuilding things from our dark age, but we were more advanced long ago. If you read the Hindu Vedas, for example, they talk about flying machines, the models that flip around in the sky that have a lot like, flying saucers, levitation craft. They talk about weapons. There's a powerful weapon that they call Trinity, I think, that devastated an entire race of people, with the whole city, and they go into great detail in the effects of that weapon when it exploded, how people's hair and their nails fell out, their hair turned white. People were running to the river trying to get away from the rain that came afterwards. The descriptions are identical to the aftermath of the Tower.
Oh, right. Even in the Bible, right, with like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, and archaeologists have gone there in recent times, and they found evidence, a lot of sulfur and things there that suggest that story may be pretty accurate. But they had an atom bomb, for example, in ancient times. That tells you there was a civilization in those times that was as advanced as we are today. And when could that have been? Well, the last golden age was about 10,000 years ago, according to the Yuga cycles. They have found the city off the coast of western India, where Krishna, the legendary, god leader of India in those times, lived. It's called Dwarka. Well, they found underwater that city. It actually exists. It's submerged. But we're starting to sort of reconstruct evidence that all those ancient stories are probably true. There are these bas-relief carvings of Vimanas flying around in the sky with people standing on them. So it tells us that there were high civilizations in the past, and during those times, according to the Vedas, we were interacting with off-planet civilizations. It was commerce, it was interaction normally, and so I think if you go back far enough, a lot of our ancient civilizations had learned things from them. They were interacting with us. It was really hard to distinguish them from us. It was a much more, it would be like trying to separate the Europeans from the English or something like that. It would be two different neighboring groups who communicated frequently. So I suspect in the Golden Ages that may have gone on. It's hard to prove because all we have is mythology, and we have some artifacts that are just too advanced to understand unless we assume something like that.
Well, and I love what you keep bringing it around to, and we're gonna kind of wrap it up as in the next couple minutes here. Just the idea of cyclical thinking and cyclical learning and curiosity. The idea that life is not a straight line, and our history is definitely not a straight line. As individuals or as an ongoing species, as humanity, we have been to these places before, and we will go there again, or as Battlestar Galactica likes to say, this has all happened before and will all happen again. And to our listeners, right?
Yeah.
Tell we remember. Yeah.
And then I guess I would just invite our listeners, like, whatever it is that you believe about our history, just open your mind, like follow your curiosity, look into myths, look into alternate possibilities, because the world is so much more mysterious and interesting than it appears to be on the surface. And the more people who are looking, the more people who are curious, the more we'll uncover. And Claude is uncovering lots, and his book Life Force is wonderful. It's thick and comprehensive and easy to read, even for a layperson. And you can.
I would just say, the listeners want to know more. Put my name, Claude Swanson, into Google, and it'll pop up into synchronized com. So through there, you can learn the two books. Get more information.
And that sounded like it came out underwater. So I'll say Google Claude Swanson, ClaudesWansson, and his universe is his website is the meet him in his universe. His website, the Synchronized Universe, and you can find his books on Amazon, and you can check out our previous podcast, The Science of Consciousness. And thank you so much for joining us again, Claude. We love talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's awesome info.
And to you, Doubly Divine listeners, we'll be back next month with a whole bunch of new information and
whatever, floats your boat, we'll have it. So thanks for listening. And you can catch Justice at embodyme.org. And I'm at integratehealing.com. And you can ask us if you need something produced in Serene Sound Studios.
And follow us on Facebook. And we love you, and we'll see you soon.